Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're signing in from. Hope today is going well so far and appreciate you taking a moment to learn a little bit more about SharePoint hub sites from an overview perspective to make sure we address what they are, what they look like, how they're to be used, and what are some of the capabilities and benefits that you get when you introduce hub sites into the mix of all of what you're doing in your mobile and intelligent intranet. My name is Mark Cashman. I'm a senior product manager on the SharePoint team working with the broader Office 365 team. And again, appreciate your time today to learn a little bit more. To set a little context, we always like to promote and certainly identify what it is that you can do with SharePoint. What can SharePoint do for you? And if you think left to right, there's a lot of capabilities that SharePoint offers for team sites of various sizes. And when those teams start to think about communicating and inform more broadly across the intranet and informing more people, they would leverage moving from something like a team site for collaboration to something like a communication site for communicating those final ideas and messaging out about their various events, campaigns, programs, raising awareness. And all the while being able to then adapt to various business processes and of course business change and change management. And how can they then harness a lot of that information across the intranet, both in people mind share information, making sure that out-of-date information isn't something that is accessed, and awareness of what is final and customer ready, and harnessing all of that collective knowledge together. So if you think about left to right, SharePoint offers a lot. And of course, there's a lot of capabilities and ways to go then about how to accomplish various scenarios and use cases, all the while ensuring that everything is manageable and controllable from an IT perspective so that whatever business guidelines are applicable across the organization are met and managed and maintained. And to also take the value of, we hope that you can do a lot out of the box just with simple configuration or just use of various parts and sites and various lists and library types across SharePoint. But of course the ability with the SharePoint framework to now to be able to extend those from a real development perspective to be able to bring in your own custom site designs, custom site themes, custom web parts, site library and list extensions, and so forth, based on what you can do from a developer's perspective. Hub sites fit into this in terms of adding a new functionality and new capability, really focused a lot around how they can help inform and engage people, but certainly how they help bridge gaps between where I put my information. I want to keep it separate, but I really want to bring it all together so that there's better cohesion across broader groups, divisions, different projects or roll-up of projects and whatnot. So if you look at this in the context of your intranet, you have a lot of building blocks, and as this slide builds out, you'll see there's a lot that SharePoint and Office 365 offer, and really where do hub sites fit in. So if you think about a group connected team sites used for collaboration, communication sites used to broadcast information across the intranet, and of course maintaining the value of sites that you've already built, leveraging custom publishing sites and different portals that you've built in the past. Those certainly will all be consistently brought together across a variety of entry points. The ones that are available today are things like the SharePoint Home, the SharePoint mobile app, gives you access to all of these sites. As you start to think about how then you move across sites or bring sites together, hub sites really brings in that element of being able to combine team sites and communication sites, or sets of communication sites and sets of team sites together under one parent level, so that you get the benefit of them coming a little bit more closer to each other, and I'll explain that here in the next slide. But of course that consistency of theme, consistency of design as you navigate across these sites is important, and underpinning once you're within the site is your ability to then build out business applications, the ability to leverage or get benefit from the Microsoft Graph, where content and people intelligently roll up and become more visible based on the person that signed in. And we always want this to be an engaging experience. In whatever modality you're discussing, sharing, highlighting, commenting, and have that not be something that's limited to just a web browser, but of course accessible in a very rich and deep way through mobile devices of all sizes, whether it's a mobile phone, a tablet, or something to the size all the way up to something like your PC, or if you're fortunate enough to have a Surface Hub, of course, everything scales and reflows really nicely without additional development or design work. That you get, of course, that mobility by default in all of the experiences. So at Ignite a few weeks ago, we announced SharePoint Hub sites and are just wanting to kind of hit that drumbeat to add clarity when people are asking, well, what are they? What do they do? So from a top level, so you can kind of get a general sense of what is a hub site. A hub site brings together related team sites and communication sites. In terms of once you've joined a team site or communication site to a hub site, you would get the benefit of the news from those joined sites rolling up to the hub level, so that, like you see here in the graphic, that hub level news is something that's actually aggregating news from across those sites and rolling them up at this level of the hub site and presenting them alongside in terms of a consistent web part, but that's actually news coming from various team sites and communication sites joined underneath the hub. The other benefit that you get is from the hub level. If you go in and perform a search, you're automatically going to be scoped to search across all related sites. So you'd be searching for content either in the hub, in the joined team site or sites, and a joined communication sites, but we automatically scope to include any site that's joined underneath the hub will become a part of that search experience when you're searching from the hub site itself. As you can see here at the top, and you'll see in demo also, that when you join a site underneath a hub site, or you're on the hub site itself, you'll see the top level cross-site navigation element that then is apparent when you click into the various sites. So as I move from a communication site to a team site and go up to the hub site homepage, that consistent navigation would always be present and available to me to navigate to all of the various sites that have been brought together. When I join a site underneath the hub site, it will inherit the look and feel, and if you look kind of visually over here on the right hand side, the color theme is this purplish blue at the hub level, and any site that's joined underneath it will inherit that theme. So this team site has inherited the theme, the communication site has inherited the theme, and that really happens within seconds, and that's to maintain that consistency of what do these various sites and groups that have been brought together, how are they represented? How are they represented by color? How are they represented by logo, individually at the individual site level, and consistently across the sites from that common logo that would be a part of the navigation element. And then finally, hub sites are something that admins create on behalf of their users and then empower various users, site owners, to be able to then join underneath the hub. But admin would create the hub either using PowerShell or from the SharePoint Online Admin Center, and those empowered individuals be able to take their site that they own and be able to join it to those hub sites which they've been given the rights to, of course, join under. So there's a ton of value in terms of an additional feature and tool set within your intranet, and we think hub sites will offer you a lot of capability to better govern and organize how your people, your projects, and of course the sites themselves, how they all come together. So when you think of your intranet, certainly we know the reality is that it's a dynamic, ever-changing digital workplace. And it's something that doesn't involve just hub sites or just one or two sites, but certainly many. And with SharePoint, in terms of the history of SharePoint, really what's led into that is people have been building portals and various sites and using team sites over time. And just as a representation, the kind of higher level types of sites are portals themselves. And as you start to build out custom portals and connect those to other sites and portals themselves, you may have leveraged a partner solution. So of course we have great partners in the intranet space who help have a quicker time to market and a nice look and feel in terms of building out the different types of sites that you want and connecting them and making that a pervasive experience. So you may have a number of sites or portals that have been leveraging partner solutions as well. All across, of course, SharePoint, bread and butter at the core are team sites, and these are prolific in terms of team sites that pop up for the use case of a couple of weeks to team sites that maybe are around in terms of the long term for multiple years, and of course members come and go as the teams change. As we introduced communication sites, we brought in some new capabilities to build out some of these same site types much quicker for the intent of that broad reach and communication. And those started to, of course, proliferate amongst different teams for various reasons, for different campaigns, different events, for highlighting product intent, but really focused on how you communicate across your intranet. And so now as we introduce hub sites, we really introduce the ability to bring a lot of these together. So now you can connect team sites and communication sites under what was represented here in this graphic in orange, the orange boxes, under the hub sites, and it's very easy to join, and of course it's easy to unjoin. And the reason that I mention that you can unjoin from a site is the reality of the dynamic, ever-changing workplace. People and groups and divisions will reorg, they'll move, and the need for the sites and the information within the sites also needs to move. So just as you change, you can see that the landscape will change, and it's very easy to then move a team site from one hub to another. And it's an activity that you can do within seconds, but of course the value is as your business changes, so too it must be reflected in the sites for the ease of who owns it, how are they going to find and access it, and then of course just moving forward and getting on with business. So with that context, one other point of clarity that we would like to put out there is the reality that a lot of the commonalities between the various site types really are there to add value in terms of how people use the different sites and the functionality within the sites. If you look across team sites and communication sites, they share a lot of technology for how you would access via the SharePoint mobile app. The ability to create news and pages is effectively the same. It's the same technology when you go to add web parts, configure the page, put out and publish your information. Certainly the way that the various parts roll up and roll out into other areas for something like news. When you create news at a team or a communication site level, the act of doing it for the end user is the same, but certainly then rolls up to the SharePoint home and the SharePoint app. Same as when you think about some of the other core aspects, whether you're working with lists and libraries, whether you're now working with Power Apps and Flow to build out forms and to do business process management. It's very much the same. There's of course some differences, with a team site being default connected to an Office 365 group and the applications within. And now moving forward, these are typically created by users, but also when we update the SharePoint Online Admin Center, admins will also be able to create these. And if you think about a communication site, a lot of that is more for broader reach, and we think that there's a communication through Yammer that's more of the default experience within the communication site. And as you start to then roll this up into adding hub sites into the mix, it brings together team sites and communication sites, as I mentioned. The core commonality of a lot of those capabilities and experiences are the same, but then the hub adds that cross-site navigation, a common and consistent theme and logo, the ability to then have the search scoped across those joined sites, and then have that news and activity roll up. So if you think about what a hub site offers in the mix of other sites and site types, it really offers those core 4 elements. So I'm going to move to demo, show you really the core aspects of what is a hub site, how to join, what it looks like on mobile, and hopefully pepper in a few other things that you may have already seen if you watch some of the Ignite, or may have not if you haven't seen anything. So let me now share out my desktop, and then hopefully you'll be able to see this. Let me minimize. And so what you're seeing here is a communication site. And to be very clear in terms of the conversation today, it is not yet joined to a hub site. So on this site I have a few pages and levels down in terms of information that we've created just for the demo purposes. At the top here you see that I've made a choice with the hero web part to minimize it to a 2/3, 1/3 layout, so I could add a few videos here. And I'm just going to scroll the page just so you can see a little bit of what I designed here, and when I then start to join this to a hub site, some of the things that then of course change and how it fits into that broader hub site level. But I have an area for news, I've got a Twitter feed here, an object and whatnot, and as I scroll down the page you'll see that I've just been using a few other web parts, and this is how this particular site has been laid out. And of course it has its own subpages like I mentioned within the navigation. I'm effectively managing or navigating around the communication site. So if I want to join this to a hub site, I would go in, and I'm a site owner, so I can go into the upper right gear and click Site Information. And then within the site information here, I will see that I have the ability to join a hub. And I'll give it a second here to resolve. Do a little refresh since this has been open just for a little bit. So you can see a lot of information obviously in the site information pane. When I click this drop down menu, it's telling me here are the available hub sites that I have access to. And when we launch this in the early part of next year, this would be scoped to whomever can add to these various hub sites, and that would be a decision by IT or the admin, and then certainly I would be able to see a list here of ones that I would be able to join my sites to. So since this is about travel, we want to join this to the Travel Programs Hub. And when I choose the Travel Programs Hub and click Save, I want to note two things. There's this red color I forgot to mention. The red color is now green because the green theme was at the hub level. So our accent colors went from red to green. And now you see the top navigation here appears, and that is coming from the hub site. But to be very clear, I'm seeing the top navigation, but I'm still on the communication site. I'm not yet at the hub level. So still now I have access to all my pages. If I go into one of these various pages, nothing has really changed except for they would also have taken on the theme or the color. So if I go into something like a news article, you'll see that it'll maintain that theme color, and I'm just now navigating within the communication site underneath the hub site. You'll see that it maintains the color scheme all the way down 2 pages like you would see here as a news article. But when I click here at the top navigation on the logo and I go up to the Travel Programs Hub, I'll start to see some unique things. The consistent theme, of course, at this level is available, and I now start to see however this page was laid out, and this is a pretty simple layout in design, but we just have the common news web part, events, and over here we've got resources that we also want to point to. But one thing to note is at the hub level we're now getting news from the various sub-sites, or the sites that are now joined underneath. And so here is news from the Contoso Adventure Travel Program. We're seeing also news from the Family Travel Program. If I go in to see all the news, you'll see that there's news coming from a lot of various sites that are joined underneath this. Here's one, news from Eco Travel. Here's news from let's see here, another one that we did a lot of demoing at Ignite from the Adventure Travel Program, so you're seeing a lot of news. But it's roll up, and now if I go again back to the hub level, this is where if I were to perform a search and I was looking for something, whether I knew it was on this site or I didn't know where it was located, but I'm hopeful that I'll find something I'm looking for within this set of sites. Doing a search from up here in the upper right is something that would then go and crawl all of those sites that fall down below. So you would do a search across sites with that. So if I go from the travel programs and I'm now on a hub level and we came from a communication site, I'm going to do one more click so you can see what it looks like to have a team site that's joined as a part of this same hub site. So as I click in from the common cross-site navigation, this is a team site that I've now landed on that has its own news. It's got its own layout and design on the particular team site, and you can see that this one made a few different choices to highlight some content. It's using a few different web parts like the new planner web part, and of course some of the things that we're doing with Microsoft Forms to do surveys, but really is focused around what do you do at the team site level, and what this team is all about is of course designing and creating these travel programs that they then manage and announce through that communication site or set of communication sites. But the portal brings it all together, the hub site brings it all together because it gives me the ability for this team to then manage across. One thing to note is when you join under a hub site, we don't change any of the permissions. All the permissions of both the hub site itself and the sites that get joined underneath are maintained. And if you'd like, from an information architecture or governance perspective, of course you can rationalize those to be the same and leverage the same permissions model or the same groups or set of people. But there's nothing that changes when you join a hub. There's nothing that we would override or make an adjustment to. So the other thing I wanted to note, if I go back to our Paris site, is at the top level you'll see that there's a consistent logo, and of course right alongside the site navigation. But each individual site, if it's something that's desired by the business, can of course have its own logo, but it all falls under the same common branding or the same look and feel. So they do get the theme. They do of course maintain the top logo and the cross-site navigation. But here you would see, if I navigate from the Paris site back to the team site, this logo is something that each team, if it was something that the business allowed, could of course have their own logo, and that could follow through. Or you could always use and leverage the same logo or a consistent set of logos across team sites and communication sites. So you'll be able to make that choice as well. The last thing I wanted to show you was, if I look at this and kind of just showcase what does it look like to have a hub site on a mobile device. So I'm just going to click through a few screens here. This would show you we're at the level of navigating from the hub site and then going through and clicking through a few of the different sites. And there's a mixture here of these to show you a little bit about what these example sites look like on mobile, and then give you a sense of how it's reflowing it and what the main site looks like on the web. So if I see here, these are to get to my parent level, and then each department, which essentially represents a joined site. If I click into it, this is now clicking into the benefits site. I would see the same as I would expect to see on a team or a communication site in the SharePoint mobile app. The news or any information that was laid out on the home page, with the ability to go in and of course navigate to the different pages or sub areas of news. If I go into this site, and what does this look like? This is what it looks like on the web. In terms of if I were at the benefits level, and I would see the hub. Now if I go into a different area, navigate to another area of the hub, I'm getting that look and feel of that team site, and I'm also then able to see, well, what does that look like? Sorry, this is a communication site. What does that look like? Where here is the top navigation, here's the navigation of the site, and of course this is what it would look like on the web. And then finally, just a graphic to show you kind of more closer to what the final design will be in terms of people being able to access and navigate to that. So that's a pretty quick overview in terms of the hub sites, in terms of when you join a site under a hub, what happens. And then the last part of the demo that I want to show you is, if I go back to our site that we were first on with the Paris site, how easy it is to unjoin, with the scenario being I have a need to either disassociate this to that hub by nature of either the program's been expired, we don't want to highlight it anymore, or it could be something more like a reorg, now a different group, or it falls under a different program that we're managing. So I can go into the site information, I can just then choose basically blank. We'll have this a little bit more fleshed out in our final design, and then I'll click save, and you'll see that the top navigation goes away. If I wanted to resort back to a different theme, I could make that choice. And all the while, I have, as an end user, wouldn't have lost an access to this site in terms of the URL. If I had been following it, if I had been following the hub, those kinds of things don't change. I'll leave you with, before we move to questions, just a look at another hub site. This one kind of takes on a little bit of a different look and feel at the hub level. And just to showcase one of the things that we're working on that we didn't talk a lot about just yet, is this concept around being able to then see all sites as far as a full site navigation element, to be able to access and see all the sites, what's going on, similar to the SharePoint home. It's one design aspect that we're thinking about. We got some good feedback at Ignite about it, and it's one of those areas where when a site joins, even if it doesn't make it into the value or the visibility of the top navigation, you would be able to have that capability to be able to navigate to all sites. So I have just a few more slides, again, to address some of the common elements or common questions that people are asking. And load this back up. So I'm just going to address about 4 common questions, and then I'll turn to answer some questions that I see are flowing through in the conversation. But the first question that we typically get is, when can I expect to see SharePoint hub sites in Office 365? And our goal is to begin rolling these out to Office 365 first release customers in the first half of calendar year 2018. And we'll definitely, of course, have a lot of kind of trickle news coming through the message center to raise awareness to admins. Of course, we'll have an updated blog post to raise awareness more publicly. And then we'll go through a social push and a lot of channels through the partner programs so that we raise awareness of their availability and that they're starting to roll out. Next question that we typically get is, can an existing team site or communication site be converted into a hub site? The answer is yes. We think this will be more of an admin action to be able to do either via PowerShell or through the SharePoint Online Admin Center. In some of our early designs, you might have seen it where it looks like the end user can do it, and that's something that we're moving to have be just an admin capability to be able to take an existing site, whether it's a team site or communication site, and deem that as the hub that then you can join other team sites and communication sites underneath. Of course, once you convert it, it'll get all the value and benefit, but certainly that is a capability that we want to support. The third question, can a hub site join under another hub site? And this is, at this point in time, the design of it is no. It doesn't mean that it's a completely flat world in terms of your navigation elements and in terms of the levels of sites that you can have, because of course we still support custom portals, which might be your main company portal, where you would then of course be able to link to and navigate to various hub sites, communication sites, team sites, partner solutions, and all of the above. But certainly if you think about a hub site, being able to connect to a team site or communication site, and then the pages within, the document libraries within, lists, and the various levels of where you could publish information to, the world is not completely flat, and certainly there's awareness of how do these all fit in. That certainly hub sites aren't necessarily going to become your full company intranet at the time when we launch them. But it certainly is a point of consideration in how we can do that over time so that you can use these building blocks and snap them more together as we're designing them already from a context of team sites and communication sites underneath a hub site. And then last question, can a team site or a communication site be joined to more than one hub site? And the answer there is no. And really the answer is no. If you join a site underneath a hub site, of course you get the benefits that we mentioned with the cross-site navigation, search scoping, news and activity roll-up. And certainly we couldn't do a lot of that roll-up of activity or the inheritance of the theme across multiple hubs. However, if you have the need to point to a site from multiple hubs, you could always do that in a very thin way in terms of just being able to link to the site itself, but without officially joining it to the hub site. So from a navigation element, you could always say, go to this particular site, link it to the site, but not necessarily have it technically joined. So from a navigation element, you of course can point to whatever you'd like, but just not officially joined under a hub site. So those are the official or most common FAQs I get. I'm going to just turn over and see which questions, if they're different, have been coming in. So just give me 2 seconds to do a little reading. Yeah, the first question is something that we definitely address, and I'll post a link right now into the blog post that I wrote that has a little bit of an answer to this first question, which I'll read out loud, but I want to also post a link here to get to the blog that we published at Ignite timeframe. But the question is, can a hub site effectively be my intranet portal? And then the follow-up is, can they be an early adopter? But certainly at various levels, if a hub site, as you start to use or pilot them, it certainly will give you a more parent level across multiple sites. And if you have a delineation of a lot of the different teams and team members and different groups and projects that are pretty easily lumped together, but it isn't something that is going to get disorganized by lumping too many things together, remembering that there is going to be a single home page for a hub site, and if that makes sense across those different businesses, then certainly you could leverage it as at least one main entry point to your intranet alongside things like the SharePoint Home and the SharePoint mobile app. But by design for moderate size to a large customer, I would think from an information architecture perspective that hub sites wouldn't solve or become your intranet portal. But in some scenarios, it is definitely possible. And as far as early adopter, as far as today, the first time that you'd be able to see hub sites is if you're a first release customer, and that's something that we'll be very clear on when we get started. Second question is, what happens with site columns and content types defined at the root site in the site collection? Are these promoted to the hub site? And the answer today, by design, is no. They certainly, for one, wouldn't get adjusted or changed, which means that you wouldn't lose the value of the work that you've already done, but they wouldn't roll up into the hub itself. But from a design perspective, there's certainly planning and thinking on our end and getting the feedback of how could you do that then from that parent level that would actually push down and inherit to any or all join sites that you wanted them to then apply to. But at this stage, that is not something that would then be promoted or roll up or change any element of either the hub or the site itself that's being joined. Ian asked if there was going to be, if you choose to inherit permissions from the parent hub site, what happens to permissions of the child site? And that's one of the common things. We don't change any permissions, so there is no inheritance of permissions. There's no changing of permissions when you join a hub site. It's more by design of your own governance in terms of the level of permissions of who you make available at the hub level, and you can have those be the same for the hub site and any joined site underneath, or you could have a mix of variety of different permissions. And the most common thing to think about is if I have a team site that I've joined underneath a hub site, but I don't necessarily want to advertise and make it available to everybody, I maintain the permissions for just that team site, a smaller set of people, and I don't maybe call it out at the navigation element level. But I'd still gain the benefits of being able to search, discover, and certainly some of the roll-up capabilities for items that I do want to have visible, or at least have it be a relevant part of that same hub site. But to be clear, we don't change permissions, and that's certainly by design so that we don't adjust anything that people aren't aware of. But you can certainly adjust them on your own and define those set of permissions and how you want them to be applicable to the various sites at the hub level, team level, communication sites level, and those could be all the same by design for you, or they could certainly be different if that's how you wanted to design it, for the benefit of value, of course, having different permissions per each site. And the last question, there's a few more. Are all news from connected sites rolled up into the hub, or is there promote functionality? At this point in time, any site that's joined underneath a hub site, that news would roll up to that news web part of the hub homepage. And if that was a little bit of a mouthful, when I'm on the home page of the hub site, I would see a roll-up of news from any news published from a team site or a communication site, or all sets of sites that are joined underneath that hub. We don't yet have the capability to promote, both from top level down or bottom level up, but it is something that we talked about at Ignite in terms of things that we're thinking for next year, in the context of being able to be more targeted with how you release news and information, and particularly thinking around more corporate news scenarios, being able to publish at a more parent level for visibility across more than just those that are either at that site or across various sites that they belong to. So there's a lot in terms of feedback and thinking that we're doing around corporate news. It's not something that we have a specific time frame or depth of content on. But it is something that will come into play when you start to think about when I publish news or when I put something at a particular site level, whether it's hub, team site, or other in the future, that you'd be able to choose the who sees it, who won't be able to not see it, or certainly target it so that it gets published out to a specific site. Even though it's not part of the question, one of the things that we did talk about at Ignite is the ability to create news from the SharePoint home, but it really is just a quicker way to create news and target it to a particular site. It doesn't necessarily promote it or move it beyond the site itself. Great question around, will calendar content roll up or just news? There's a lot of concepts we're wanting to push out in terms of when you create content at the joined site level, so at the team or communication site level, what rolls up into the hub site. But for today, the only thing we're communicating is that news and activity are in the first release of the hub sites will be what we roll up from communication sites and team sites. But there's a lot of things, of course, that you create at the site level that we would love to best represent at the hub site level. And that's some great feedback for today, and certainly just clarity on what to expect on the first release. I'll knock off the last few here pretty quickly. By nature of time, we want to stick to half an hour, make sure you get back to your work. But let's look real quickly. Can you link a hub as an MS Teams chat for aggregating teams? Not at this time. That is great feedback and an interesting scenario. You could leverage a hub site as an entry point, but how about process approvals for access? That's definitely something that we're looking at across all different sites and file types in terms of different workflows for approval, both in when it gets published, approval, of course, of people to be able to create sites. We expect that once a hub site is established, that you'll be able to create either a team site or a communication site from the hub level, and then, of course, be approved for creation of those sites and how they get joined, so that if somebody tries to join a hub site, that there may be an approval process before it actually is joined or shows up in any way at the hub site level. Any plan on getting Office 365 calendars imported? I'm not sure if that's too relevant to hub sites, if I understand the question correctly. I don't know the answer to that, but we can certainly take that offline with the Exchange team. But the way that it would kind of appear at a hub level is if, of course, you had a calendar that you wanted to share or a set of events. There, of course, are the web parts that we offer today that allow you to manage some of that visibility so that people can find out what events are coming up that are represented by this group or team or division within the context of the hub site. The highlighted content web part, Sue, that's a great question. Certainly is something, when you think about the scoping of the search from the hub down to all associated sites, that is something that the team is thinking about how we can represent that automatically when you add a highlighted content web part at the hub page level. We want to already scope, or give you at least the choice to be able to scope to all associated sites. Same as today, as you can do sites, all sites, or from specific libraries. So definitely is something that you should expect that there would be some element of how the hub influences what you can do in the highlighted content web part. And then the last question here, and then we'll sign off, from Simon: is there a limit on number of sites that can be a part of a hub site? At this point today, no. By nature of, you should be able to join a site under a hub. We haven't really published what those limits would be, but effectively think in terms of the limits of what are the limits of the business. And there may be the visible limits. How many items would you put in a navigation, the cross-site navigation? Most likely you may join a lot of sites, not all of them to appear in the cross-site navigation. But certainly a lot of sites might just be a plethora of team sites that are related to that vision or set of projects or products. And of course, you would expect those to be related underneath, but not necessarily visible. So we'll definitely dig into that, and we'll make sure that from a support perspective, we answer some of those questions a little bit more granularly, or to be very frank, if we don't feel that there are any hard limits that would impact how people leverage and use hub sites beyond the ones that we've already published, because a hub site effectively has a lot of the same limits of a team site and a communication site in terms of storage, how many different items and lists and whatnot, all those which are fairly high in scale. And for what you do at the hub, certainly the benefit is you do a lot of those actions in the team or the communication sites. So it's a shared resource in terms of where you put your content, who's accessing it, what are they accessing. But certainly a lot more to come, including some business white papers and technical support documents at the time of launch. But for now, hopefully you got a benefit of a little over 30 minutes of sort of what is hub site, how does it fit in the rest of SharePoint Online in the context of Office 365, and hopefully the demos and decks and Q&A came through, and I'll try to package it up and put it out there if you want to review it or if you want to share it with somebody who wasn't able to join today. But thank you for your time, thank you for your interest, and have a great rest of your week. And of course, thanks for thinking of Office 365, and thanks for joining in today.